Anyways, we're gonna start by just kind of recapping. We're not even recapping. The offseason came and went. We saw, the draft. We saw free agency. We have thoughts, and so we're gonna take some time. Got a little truncated amount of time here to just share some of our thoughts on what we've witnessed this offseason, what we liked, what we possibly didn't like, all of the things. So let's just kind of, I guess we want to start positive, just throw it out, what we like, what we didn't, or kind of just go throw out a team and just kind of discuss from there. How do we feel about it?
I think the first makes more sense if we want to keep this to the point where Garrett's not up until 3.
Yeah, which could very well happen. All right, so let's do what we liked. Let's start with what we liked in the offseason. Kind of work around the room. Let's start Josh, Garrett, and then we'll go with me.
Yeah, so the offseason that I really liked the most so far has been the Indiana Pacers. I thought their draft was really good. Not only getting Jarris Walker at 8, but making that trade back and picking up an additional asset, knowing that the Wizards had the pressure to get ahead of them for that 7th pick. Picking up Ben Shepherd later. I think both of those players fit very well with what the Pacers are trying to do. On top of that, they got Bruce Brown, NBA champion, fits perfectly with that kind of need to improve their defense. And the way his contract is structured, like it's in some ways a massive overpay, but it also works because it's functionally a 1-year contract that they have the team option on for the 2nd year. So they basically just gave him a 1-year, $20 million type deal to kind of bring that championship experience, that kind of hard-nosed defense, and really kind of help the younger players of the Pacers kind of develop that defensive stuff. And I also thought I'm a Duarte fan, but I understand the move to get some 2 second-round picks, I think, back, which they also sent 2 second-round picks to pick up Obi Toppin, who I think I've told you guys in the past, the worst thing you can be in this league is boring. And prior to the Halliburton trade, the Pacers were boring. They had good talent. When they were healthy, they were relatively effective, but they were never fun. And now that they have Halliburton and Mathurin, they're embracing transition. They're pushing the pace. They were 5th last year. I think that is going to go even further. I think Halliburton, Bruce Brown, and Obi Toppin were all top 5 in the NBA last year in terms of field goal percentage in transition. So it's very clear that they're really chiseling out a focus and a goal for this team, an identity. And I really like how they've gone about doing that. And also, they extended Halliburton, who's the best player they've probably had since Reggie. So I have seen no fault in their offseason so far.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love what the Pacers did. Yeah, I think it's interesting too with the 2 like power forwards essentially that they acquired with Jarris Walker and Obi Toppin, that they can kind of go with a more all defensive front shoot in Obi.
So it appears that we lost Garrett there. So we're gonna get back to him. Oh, sort of. We can sort of hear you, but not really.
All right.
Corban, what was kind of your favorite stuff from this offseason, or a team that you thought did really well? this offseason. So
I got to bring up a team that could have went and chased the allure of stars, possibly fall into a bad trap, but came and had a sensible offseason to kind of augment, some weaknesses they had and preserve that continuity. And that's the Los Angeles Lakers, of course. I think
surprise.
I think that they cemented themselves as one of the off-season's winners here. They locked in that continuity for next season. I think they did a really good job of rounding out the roster. They brought back Austin Reeves for 4 years, approximately $56 million with a fourth-year player option, which is a steal. They didn't have to go into the arena's rule contract. They weren't pressured by other teams to overpay him to a massive degree. Like, they did a really good job of putting out the smoke signals that we will do whatever it takes to
and they did.
Mm-hmm.
That is the maximum they could pay him. So they did do everything they could. So
they did. Yep. And they did it without explicitly saying it and possibly drawing the ire of the Players Association, just through the media, the mouthpiece. Anyone who listened, yeah, we're keeping this guy. So that was a good thing they did. Bringing back D'Angelo Russell. Not only did I like the fact they brought him back, the playoff performance in the conference finals, notwithstanding, I thought he did a really good job in the first 2 rounds to kind of help the Lakers get where they got, at least to a certain point. Thought he was a big part of the boost of their play in the second half. But it was good. I also like the contract. I think 2 years, $37 million, that's not bad value for a player in his prime. We kind of know what he is offensively, shot maker. You can play kind of both guard roles. You're not getting a very good defender, but getting a pretty good playmaker and a guy who is not afraid of taking and making the big shot. So I like that. I also like the signings of Gabe Vincent, Torian Prince, Rui Hachimura. Retaining him was great. They went and took 2 other swings, one in Cam Reddish, which I'm not too upset with, one with Jackson Hayes, which I'm a little more upset with. But, all in all, I like the way the Lakers went into this offseason. They obviously had a clear plan of attack. They weren't swayed by making these big, star chases and going for a Kyrie or whatever the case may be. Had Austin Reeves been an unrestricted free agent, he probably would have had a contract well north of $100 million. So the fact that they got him on what they have through his age 28 season with that player option, I think is really, really solid. And yeah, I think that this was good altogether. If you look at who they brought in, Gabe Vincent, the type of small guard who thrives off of LeBron James, or D'Angelo Russell, he played well off of LeBron James, a better fit than Russell Westbrook, which he essentially replaced, as much as I hate to say that, right? Torian Prince comes in shooting a good clip from 3, can actually play some decent defense. I don't like the signing of Mr. Hayes, Jackson Hayes, okay. But, I guess he brings you size. Shot 75% from within 3 feet of the rim for his career, which isn't bad at all. But, he's a flyer, I guess, right? All in all, I think the Lakers are just a deeper team that's better supported to withstand the 20 or so games that LeBron and or AD will miss. Actually, AD and or LeBron will miss.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, yeah, I loved what I loved what the Lakers did as well. Yeah, I technically look at it as they upgraded from Schroeder to Vincent. Vincent is a much better shooter. Defenses are not going to be able to sag off of him like they did with Schroeder, which makes things easier on the likes of LeBron and AD. And, Torian Prince is essentially replacing Troy Brown, and he's a much better, more reliable shooter out there. As Corban mentioned, D'Angelo Russell, not one of my favorite guys in the world, but, he's a guy that can do some innings eating during the regular season. And they also got Austin Reeves on a great deal, and they were able to guarantee Jared Vanderbilt, retain Rui Hachimura. So they did just a little bit of everything that you would want, and retaining all the key guys and adding a little bit, upgrading at some key spots. They didn't get that third star to make it like a true big 3, but you're also hoping that maybe Reeves takes another leap and makes it a bona fide big 3 with him, LeBron, and AD. They were pretty great. I was listening to this on the Low Post recently, but they had a great net rating when the 3 of them were on the court. So a little bit more continuity, some upgrades around the edges for a team that made the Western Conference Finals, I think is a darn good offseason.
Agreed. I think clearly the winners of the offseason. I'm just kidding. But no, definitely like what they've done as well. Any other notes or individual team fits, draft selection that we want to talk about that we liked?
I'll mention my team that I was really impressed with, and that was the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think they did a really great job with they obviously had the huge hole at the small forward position. Everyone knew it. And they got about the best guy that they could conceivably get there in Max Strus. He's a little undersized for the three, but he's strong. He can shoot the basketball not only off the catch, but on the move, which adds another element to their offense. He's, still relatively young. I think he's 27 right now. So he's a guy that's smack dab in his prime. They got him on a deal that's around $16 million per season, which is, I think a fair rate. That's basically starter money at this stage, given the rising cap. So I think they did really good there. They also recognized in that series against the Knicks that they just could not shoot the basketball. Their offense just completely fell apart. And adding a guy in George Niang as well with the mid-level was a great get for them. He doesn't do a lot but other than shoot, but he has been a consistently reliable three-point shooter throughout his career. And I think he's going to be able to play with both Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. So, yeah, I thought the Cavs did exactly what you would want them to do to build around that big four that they already have established.
Josh, you have any thoughts on the Cavs and their signings there?
I loved Niang and Strus for them. Like, it's a clear hole for them, not just in terms of the small forward, but like the spacing that they need, and particularly off-ball spacing, because their two best shooters are the two guys who have the ball in their hands the most. So, like, having Strus and Niang to fill that role, I think, is going to really elevate that team next season. I thought they did very well. And I got to say, I thought the Lakers did very well as well. I'm not a huge fan of D'Angelo Russell, but like you said, Corban, that's not like a significantly bad contract. It's not like Russ's contract was. I do. Corbin's face is perfect. It was a bad contract. I do gotta give the Jazz a shout out. They got John Collins for basically nothing. I also think Taylor Hendricks was a really good draft pick for them. And then on top of that, Keontae George and who was the other guy they got? Sensabaugh?
Yeah, Bryce Sensabaugh.
Yeah. They did very well in the draft. They got Collins for like a couple seconds. They still don't really necessarily have a point guard. I'm not sure how they're really going to address that. I could see Clarkson starting in that role. I could see Sexton starting in that role.
I thought Corban was going to chime in with Colin Sexton.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can see them starting, but I don't think either of them are point guards. Either of them are playmakers.
He's the next All-Star in Utah. You can book it. Colin Sexton.
But no, I thought they did really well, and I gotta give the Jazz an even bigger shout out for the offer sheet that they gave to Paul Reed that basically trolled the Sixers, because the offer sheet functionally would have been just a 1 year, I think like $7-something million deal for them for Paul Reed, but if Paul Reed's team made the second round in the upcoming season's playoffs. The last 2 years, which were for much bigger money, would be guaranteed. Now the Jazz in the West feel like that's probably a safe bet for them, and if they did make the second round, they're probably happy to pay that. But for the Sixers, that makes the cost of retaining Paul Reed much tougher. And on top of it, it's an added little jab that they left it at the second round of the playoffs because the Sixers haven't gone past that. So
yeah,
shout out Jazz.
I will say in that particular case, I think Paul Reed at around $8 million a year is still a good deal for the Sixers at his age. So I don't think even if they do make the second round, I don't think that's going to be that big of an issue for them that he gets those last 2 years guaranteed.
I think it's interesting because I look at the Jazz as a team that I'm unsure. I mean, for the Philadelphia part, Paul Reed, like, retaining great. Utah made a good play, I think, on him. Like, that was nice. But like looking at Utah itself, it's hard for me to like, are they a team that's looking to compete next year? Are they a team that's kind of riding out? I mean, I think it's interesting. I don't know. Like, they have some young, like, good pieces. I mean, I like Keontae George. Obviously, Colin Sexton just needs another year to fully reach his potential, I think. If we look at a guy like John Collins, who was 26, like, so not in his prime, but like getting there. Like, Larry Markkinen. Also, they have a lot of bigs there in my mind. Like, I feel like there needs to be some type of consolidation moving forward for Utah. And yet, I don't know it. At least right now, there hasn't been any noise that there is anything. Josh bringing about Kelly Olynyk. That's potential there. I definitely think so. But I'd feel a lot better about Utah if I knew the direction. To get John Collins, the opportunity cost was like basically nothing. So like that right there off the top, great. But I would feel a lot more better. I mean, I'd feel a lot more better if I knew what they were doing.
There was an opportunity cost, though, to get John Collins, and that's you impinge upon Taylor Hendricks' kind of opportunities a bit by bringing in Collins.
And
so
also,
there was
an opportunity. They essentially took Collins in the cap with their cap space, so they lose what they could have theoretically done with that cap space as well over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, there you go.
But
I guess that's
still a good move.
Yeah, it's still solid, but no, I appreciate you bringing it up because I hadn't necessarily thought of it from that perspective, and that's true. Like, something was gone in that. I mean, you did take on a big contract, but I also feel like his growth was just stunted in Atlanta, and his shooting was regressing. Some of that, I think, his hand, he had like a thumb injury for a large part of it. Some of that just feel like the way he's utilized, just not getting good looks and just not being, increasingly marginalized. So in Utah, I mean, I don't think he's going to be more showcased, but I think he's going to be more showcased in Atlanta just because, but I don't know how much more, but I still think it's a nice pickup. But let's look a little, okay, let's go. We did some more of like free agency, some of that. We've touched a little bit on draft. Let's kind of swing around with some draft fits that we enjoyed. Josh, you can start with you, then go to Garrett. Just, I don't know, a fit. I mean, you already mentioned Jarris Walker. I know Bryce Sensabaugh has been talked about a little bit. But what are some draft fits that you look at, like, you know what, like, I actually like that. Whether it's for the player, for the team, ideally both. What do we think about that?
Yeah, obviously there's this guy, not a lot of people are talking about him, but I thought he was a really good pick. Victor Wembanyama. I think he's going to be really good for the Spurs. Honestly, I kind of, and he's not even my type of player really, but I kind of like Washington swinging on Coulibaly. I kind of like it. There were a few like good like fits, I thought, like Grady Dick going to Toronto. Like, they desperately need shooting. And he'll also bring a lot of fun stuff to that team's like social media department. That kid's goofy. Personally, I thought that Jaime Jaquez to Miami at 18, and then Podziemski to Golden State at 19. I thought those two were like perfect players for how those teams operate. Like, I'm not saying they're necessarily the best talent that was on the board at the time, but those players are going to come in and from day one fit in, not just with the offensive and defensive schemes, but with like the culture of those teams. So I like those picks. And I know, Corban, you were watching the draft with me. I really thought that it was cool that the Nets took Dariq Whitehead, because his surgery was actually done by the Nets in-house team physician. So like if anybody knew the status of his like recovery and his injury and stuff, it was them. So those were a couple of the ones that I liked. Obviously, I also got to shout out my champion Denver Nuggets. I thought Strother and Hunter Tyson and Jalen Pickett were three really good pickups for them that should hopefully be able to contribute within the next 2 seasons, within ideally that championship window. And that obviously goes against most people's draft philosophy. You know, you swing hard, but like when you're in a championship window and you have Nikola Jokic and you have Jamal Murray, you need guys like a Pickett, Strother, and Tyson. And I thought Calvin Booth has just continued to be impressive, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like all of those. A couple picks that I really enjoyed. I think Dallas did really well to not only get off of Bertans moving down from 10 to 12, but then to get Derek Lively, who I think is the exact type of player that team needs. You know, Luka Doncic is one of the best lob passers in NBA history, and I think Derek Lively could become sort of a Tyson Chandler-esque sort of role, vertical threat. He also is outside of Wembanyama. He was my second best, shot blocker, rim protector in the draft. So to get a guy there that I think can be a two-way force, and even has shown in some workouts some ability to shoot the ball, that could be down the line, could also space the floor a little bit. I think that's a really good value for Dallas. We talked about the Jazz guys briefly, but I liked both of their selections. Keontae George was really impressive in summer league. And then in the second round, a couple of guys I really liked. Jordan Walsh to the Celtics. He was a guy that defensively just a monster in college, and obviously had some limitations on the offensive end, but you knew that he was going to be similar to like a Herb Jones. You knew that this guy was going to be a defensive difference maker right out of the gate. And, you can hopefully develop that offensive game and do enough that he can make an impact. And with Boston, acquiring Porzingis, they have a lot of lineups where they can have 4 shooters, and then you insert Walsh and he can kind of be in the dunker spot, right? And where maybe if his shooting doesn't come around, he can still hide out there enough offensively, just, get some offensive rebounds, make some timely cuts, and then be that defensive stopper. So I like that. And then also another Spurs pick, I really liked Sidi Sissoko. I was really high on him in the draft, but getting a guy who I think has all defensive potential, that can also dribble and pass. The shooting has to come around, of course. That's going to be a swing skill for him. But, a guy that has elite strength, really good mobility, decent length, seemingly has a pretty good feel out there, and brings some skills offensively where he can grab rebounds and go coast to coast. He can be a connector and make the right pass, make the right reads. So I really like those couple of picks at 38 and 44, respectively.
Yeah, those are some solid listings of some good players and team fits. Listen, I hate to be that guy, but I gotta look at number 17. From Indiana, Jalen Hood-Schifino. Definitely like what I've seen from him as this bigger kind of lead guard initiator. Wish he could shot 3 a little better. I actually wish the Lakers had went for Ken Whitmore. especially given how he played, in Summer League. But I thought that was a nice selection. Maxwell Lewis, I think, going to Lakers later as well. Someone who brings some additional size, brings some shooting, I thought was good as well. Portland, I like Portland's draft. Obviously, the star of the show is Scoot Henderson and just how he looked in his limited summer league action, but just how he fits in. And yeah, we have to figure out what's going to happen with Damian Lillard, where he goes, and the return on that. But having Scoot Henderson, I think he was one of the other guys outside of Victor Wembanyama who I feel has real, true star potential. A guy who can jump out the gym, can throw down poster dunks, but has a really good basketball IQ. In addition to that, Chris Murray. Chris Murray's probably not going to be a star in the NBA, but he has the tools to be a really productive role player moving forward, right? He averaged, 6.8 three-point attempts in Iowa, which
You say he can't be a starter? I think he could be a starter.
No. I'm sorry. I meant star.
Oh, okay.
I must have slurred my words. No, he most definitely can be a starter. My mistake. I said he can't be a star. I don't see star upside in him. I'd be surprised. But, I definitely see a solid starter. Someone who, can play decent defense, bring some good positional length and sizing, and also shoot the three ball pretty well. I like that. I mean, his 3-point percentage in college wasn't super great, but when you look at how many he took, I think it averages out. And then Ryan Rupert, 6'7" with a 7'3" wingspan. Defensive, I think he'd be a disruptive, versatile defender. I like him as well. His offensive game is not great, at all. But just what he brings defensively is good. And you're adding this to a group of Shaedon Sharpe and other young guys, that are on this team. I mean, I still believe in Mr. Little. I still believe in Keon Johnson. There's other guys in this crop of young guys that I think this class can really help. And again, this is not even mentioning, what comes out of the haul that the Blazers get back for Damian Lillard. What other young players and prospects will go? Although the front office has been weird saying that they still want to win despite losing Damian Lillard, that kind of feels counterproductive to me. I don't think that Jeremy Grant and whatever you get back from the Dame trade is going to help you win more than Damian Lillard. But besides that, just draft fit, I definitely like Scoot Henderson there. I just think that they had the easy decision to make. They had a star outside prospect, and they brought him on. And, oh, yes, how did I forget my guy who's in several of my basketball GM files, Anthony Simons. Love the guy. Okay, we have some – Jerry, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree. I think Portland did a great job. I mean, they the Scoot pick was the easy one because he was the second best player in this draft, and he fell to 3. And then Chris Murray was, I thought another solid pick. I think teams overthought this a little bit. I think once you get to 10 or later in the draft, getting a guy that you're pretty confident can be a solid starter is a great pick at that point. So he was a guy that, maybe he probably doesn't have the upside of his brother Keegan, but you knew he could shoot. You knew he's long. He's a decent athlete. He's going to make the right play. He runs hard. He plays hard. So, if you got a guy that's a reliable shooter, plays hard, has decent positional size, that's a good starter in the league. I thought that was a great pick. And then, Rupert, similar to the Jordan Walsh pick in the second round, I think if you can, at that stage in the draft, if you know for sure that the guy is going to be pretty good on one end of the floor, and then you can work and try to make the other end palatable, that's a guy worth taking. And Rupert, with his length, I think is going to be a pretty darn good defensive player. And maybe the offense never works out, but I'd rather take a chance on a guy like that than a guy who maybe is even below average on both ends that you have to get up to a decent level on both sides of the floor. That just seems tougher to me.
I totally agree. Josh, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. In those types of situations, I always just think you don't need that person to be elite on the offensive end. You need that person to be a capable 4th or 5th option for some playoff minutes. That's it. You don't need this person to be running ISOs themselves or necessarily even attacking closeouts all the time. You just need somebody who at the very least can Bruce Bowen it and hit a corner 3, know when to cut. You don't need a third, second, or first option offensively out of these guys. If the defense is strong enough and you can get them to a fourth or fifth option on offense, I don't see what the problem is.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a guy like Tony Allen is the perfect example,
Yep.
right? Like he never even got to average offensively. Like he got to a point where he could dribble it a little bit, he could catch and drive and slash and cut, but he never became a reliable shooter. But he was still a very much a positive player because he was elite on one end, and they got him good enough offensively that he could survive out there. Corban's questioning whether Tony Allen is good. Is that what
I'm trolling you, Garrett. I just want to.
It's because it's defense, and Corban only believes in offense.
I mean, we all remember the immortalized grit and grind Grizzlies that made it so far in the playoffs. But I'm just kidding. Jokes aside.
They made it farther than the Philadelphia 76ers have in the Embiid era.
And on that note,
I'm just saying.
I did have a couple of teams that I thought would just be interesting to discuss.
Yeah, let's hit it. Let's hear it.
So the two teams I wanted to discuss, and I'm largely down on these teams' off seasons, but I could see an argument, or the direction or whatever makes some sense. But Toronto and Houston. So let's start with Toronto. I think the thing that is so perplexing about what they're doing here is, they made the win now trade for Jakob Poeltl at the trade deadline and gave up a first round pick to do so with pretty light protections. And then they did that without an expectation that they would re-sign Van Fleet, or at least, weren't fully committed to doing so. Van Fleet only got 2 guaranteed years from Houston. It was, a lot of money for Fred Van Fleet. He's being overpaid for the player that he is. But at the same time, like, if you're Toronto and your commitment has been to continue to compete, losing Van Fleet for nothing is just untenable. And so, especially when it was, okay, yeah, maybe a 5-year max deal is just like, no, we absolutely cannot do that. But 3-year max for Van Fleet, I think I would have been okay pulling the trigger on that, even knowing he was going to be overpaid for those 3 years, just so that, the team is at a level where you can continue to compete, and maybe you're one piece away. Like there's obviously the whole Dame Lillard drama going on, but they could have made a move, and they still can even without Van Fleet. But if they had Van Fleet, they could make a move with Gary Trent Jr. as matching salary, Scotty Barnes package with like Otto Porter and Thad Young, and you could get to the point where you're just adding Damian Lillard to a core of Van Fleet, OG Anunoby, Siakam, Poeltl, and all of a sudden that team looks like they're right in contention again. But losing Van Fleet for nothing, they could still try to make that grab for Damian Lillard, but they certainly aren't going to be as good as a team with Lillard and Van Fleet.
True that. I'm going to let you go first, Josh.
I've also found Toronto's offseason interesting, and not always in a good way. Like I said, I like the Grady Dick pick. Damn it, that's going to get clipped perfectly to just be Dick pick. Much like you were showing me the Fat Joe just being like, I like that Kansas Dick. But no, Grady Dick will be a good player for the Toronto Raptors. I thought the contract for Jakob Poeltl was solid. But yes, it's a very weird compounding of last season's trade deadline decision making, where you're kind of straddling, do we retain these guys? Do we try to go younger and just build completely around Scotty and maybe OG? And they're seemingly trying to have their cake and eat it too, which is weird considering Masai was ready to blow it up when he first got into Toronto. Like, they had a deal with New York to move Kyle Lowry. Like, they had a deal, and then the Knicks front office was like, wait, we did the Bargnani deal with you. Why are we talking with you? So Masai has always kind of wanted to tear it down and build it up. And when he now had the opportunity at the trade deadline, he didn't do it. And in fact, like kind of doubled down by bringing in Pirtle. It's just very interesting. And I don't necessarily dislike Dennis Schroeder, but like it's such a massive drop off from Fred VanVleet to Dennis Schroeder. So they're going to take a major step back unless, Scotty takes a leap or OG takes the leap that everyone's kind of been hoping he takes for a while. So it's just a very weird kind of dance that the Raptors front office has been doing.
Yeah, and you wonder if it's just an issue with them valuing their own players too highly, right? And there were rumors that they got some great offers for VanVleet, for OG, for Siakam at last trade deadline, and they've refused all of that. And again, even Pirtle, even though they were trading for him from another team, he was an original draft pick by Toronto. So it's, again, a sort of a doubling down on some of their own guys. But again, I keep going back to the same thing where it's like, okay, if you're valuing your own guys and you're going for it, you're a buyer, not a seller, then pay up for VanVleet. You mentioned Schroeder as a downgrade, but it's specifically a downgrade at the thing the Raptors need the most, which is shooting. They added Grady Dick that helps. But then you go from a very good shooting point guard to a well below average shooting point guard. And you've still got this conglomeration of 6'8", 6'9" wings that, don't necessarily all fit well together offensively. And you just wonder, okay, where is this going? And at what point do they change their tact and say, all right, we're going to sell some of these guys off, because we could have the same issue next year where they lose an OG for nothing, just like they just lost VanVleet.
Yeah, and there's also the Siakam stuff. There's been some talk about Siakam wanting an extension and the Raptors seemingly not working with him on that. Siakam's name has been coming up in trade discussions and rumors tied to Atlanta or Indiana, and Siakam seems to be very loyal and wants to stay in Toronto. But if this continues and like they don't offer him an extension and they're constantly putting his name out there in trade rumors, does that change and then you lose Siakam for nothing next offseason?
It's very possible. I think that they're actually leaning more toward that way. I think both you and Garrett have brought up great points about the Raptors probably putting their guys in a bigger light than they are. Like you said, like demand the world for them and seeing them leave. And I think we've seen this in the last couple of years. I'm trying to think of another team that did the exact same thing. Maybe I just keep thinking of Toronto, but like the overvaluing your own players and then realizing that they could walk for nothing and you could have something of value for them. But rather than haul out the farm like the Godfather offer, what it reminds me of? It's not the same, but the reverse, like the Celtics back when they had all those draft picks and they were, we could go for Paul George or Jimmy Butler or all these things, and none of it happened, right? And they got really good with Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, but that was pretty much it, right? And it's like the inactivity, despite being in a position where you can do something because you value your picks in an unrealistic fashion or overvalue your players in unrealistic fashion, sets you up for failure. And then you're like, we're still trying to win, so Dennis Schroeder it is. And mind you, I like Dennis Schroeder. I think he's a story, and that's a good. I think that he's a story. Dennis Schroeder went from playing himself out of a big payday to sort of redeeming his value in LA. He was really a valuable piece, even though Coach Ham loved him in those 3-guard lineups, which I only think should be done in video games, but fine. He liked that, and Schroeder regained some value. But at the end of the day, this guy is a guy who's going to be 31, undersized, doesn't shoot very well. I still am high on his like water bug quickness, but you have to imagine at some point that's not super great. And yeah, is it enough to tread water for a year or so? Yeah, but why are you doing that when you had a better player at the same position you could have just retained? So I completely agree with you. If the goal was to just bottom out, okay, then why bring Dennis in? You know, if it wasn't, then keep Fred. But no, you haven't. And now, like you said, you have another one coming up at OG, and all the offers have been talked about, reported, unreported, whatever the case may be. What happens to him? And then down the line with Pascal, and Pascal's older. So like this timeline that if you didn't trust the core to begin with the Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, if you weren't fond of that core, now you take out one of them, another year older for another. And OG, I think, is a very good 3-and-D guy, but I don't think he's ever going to be that all-purpose wing. Like, that's not a core I trust, personally. So, I don't know. I mean, I still think Scotty needs a lot more work. I was never high on him, though. So, maybe I'm a little negative. But at the same time, like, I think that he needs to be in a role that he is in a detailed, this is what you do well, playing transition, run the floor, play defense, versatile kind of terror on one end and playing within your strengths of the offensive end. I definitely don't think he's a point guard like everyone's been talking about, right? Gary Trent Jr., good shooter. His defense slipped from Portland, but you could kind of get him into a 3 and sort of D kind of player. Grady brings the D. But like shooting, and then aside from that, Jakob Poeltl plays your defense. Like, that's not a core that inspires faith in me. I'm sorry, I wasn't going. But yeah, so I don't know. That I agree with you. I think it's just franchise mismanagement on Toronto's end, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and like people were criticizing them as like at last year's trade deadline, and I wasn't, mainly because I thought, okay, if you get a full season of Poeltl, you get some development from Barnes. You get some more added continuity. You add somebody in the draft like a Grady Dick. Like, yeah, they could have been, if they brought everyone back, they could have won 50 games. I think that's that might be on the high end, but I think that was possible. And when you get to that point, yeah, you're a player away from doing what they did in 2019. But the fact that, yeah, they let VanVleet walk then has just completely perplexed me because, yeah, now I'm just saying, well, they're not doing either path. They're not competing now, and they're not building assets for a Scotty Barnes-led Raptors unit here for the next 5-10 years. And that's where, right, that sort of trying to play both just isn't working.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of playing both, let's turn our attention to Houston. Houston, do we have a problem? Oh, I'm sorry. It walked right into that. Like, how do we feel about Houston? Garrett, let's start with you, then we'll go to Josh. I just think that Josh has already given the signal of no bueno. But, Garrett, what do you think? Because I don't know. Like, I like their core. I like their young guys. I'm still high on Jalen Green. I loved Jabari Smith. I thought he should have been the number 1 pick last year. He didn't play like it, but Summer League came and whoop-de-doo. Like, I definitely see improvement there. Torrey Eason looks like he'd be that kind of multi-purpose wing, a little bit of everything, maybe not a jack of all trades, but like a 2023, version of Corey Brewer, which Corey Brewer wasn't that old. But like in terms of like somebody who like does a little bit of everything, brings energy. I think he's better on defense, but like kind of does a little bit of everything in my mind. That probably wasn't the best comparison, but a guy like that, like I like Houston's young guys. Alperen Sengun, I don't know if it fits in Houston, but I like him as a player. You know what I mean? But then you have these other guys. You have the aforementioned Fred VanVleet. You have Dylan Brooks, Jeff Green. I don't know. I have questions. I'm curious.
Yeah, there's like as far as some of the young picks, like I liked both of the draft pick of Amen Thompson at 4, and I liked Cam Whitmore taking a flyer on a guy that fell at 20. Like I like both of those selections. Jabari Smith showed everything you would want to see from a second-year guy at Summer League. He looked like he was too good for Summer League, and that's what you want to see from a guy who was a top 5 pick last year. But, yeah, the VanVleet thing, even though I really like VanVleet as a player, I do sort of question, okay, is this them trying to fast-track the rebuild at the expense of the development of some of their young players? Like, I think Amen Thompson, just from the one game that he played at Summer League, was so good. And I would want to just put the ball in his hands and give him as many reps with the ball as humanly possible. And I'm worried that this is just going to be a team run by Fred VanVleet, and he's going to get 15 minutes a night or something like that. And then, the Dillon Brooks contract. I understand that they had so much cap space. They needed to spend it on someone. But giving him 4 years, I do not understand that at all. A balloon payment for a year or two, sure. But 4 years for Dillon Brooks after he had one of the worst offensive seasons in basketball, I really don't get that. And, Corban, you brought up a guy like Jeff Green as well. They're adding all of these veterans, and you wonder, okay, well, where's Cam Whitmore fit in? Where is he going to get time to play? So they've got this exciting young core, but yeah, you worry, is the ownership, is the head coach, is this organization in general trying to win 35 games at the expense of being better 2 or 3 years down the road when this team should be hitting its peak?
That is exactly what they're doing, Garrett. And there's two big reasons for that. One, they don't control their draft pick next year. So, and in reality, and I see this so much, people talked about this with the Brooklyn Nets and stuff like, oh, well, you can't tank. And obviously you shouldn't tank if you don't have control of your pick. But like, there's this idea that like, well, you have to compete or else it'll look bad. Screw that. I don't care if it looks bad. That was the cost of making the trade that I made. Like I know there's a cost to it. And yeah, that other team might get a good pick out of it. That's what it is. But that element is a pressure on Houston of, do we want to continue to get another top 5 pick and then gift it to somebody else? That's not a good look. But also you shouldn't care what it looks like. You should care what it actually means and does. The other thing is the owner did not expect the rebuild to take this long. And a large part of that, and this is where like I think it's more of a gray area when it comes to development stuff, Garrett, like you mentioned, like, yes, it does in some ways hinder opportunities for Amin and Cam, but also having an actual point guard, an actually good NBA point guard is going to do wonders for Jabari Smith Jr. and for Jalen Green and even for Şengün. And it's going to do wonders for Amin and Cam as well. It's just those opportunities are going to be a little weird. And like the Dillon Brooks thing, I get that you, like Garrett said, you do have to spend up to the salary floor by the start of the season. Like you have to do that. So there is some logic there. But he's now going to be taking minutes from Tari, who's really, really good at what you want paired around the offense of a Jalen Green, a Jabari Smith Jr., and a Şengün. Like Tari's a great connective piece there. So it's just, again, like there's a logic to it, but it's not a logic I necessarily agree with. And I get wanting to bring in some veteran leadership. And I think Fred is going to help calm things down and like get things a little more structured, which I think will ultimately help. But also I think there are ways you could have done this in a way that doesn't have you on the hook for 4 years of Brooks and doesn't have you on the hook for the amount of money that you're now paying Fred VanVleet. And so it's just a very kind of like Toronto. It's a little bit of a mix of like, we want to, compete so that our draft pick that someone else controls doesn't look too bad as a reflection on us. Also, our owner is kind of getting tired of us sucking horrifically, which, to be fair, it would suck to have, you know, the Houston Rockets of the last like the last 3 seasons or so be your team. I probably wouldn't like that if I was the owner either, even if I was aware that, like, you know, this is a long-term process and everything. After like how bad the Rockets have been over that time, I can understand a little bit of like, okay, let's get this rolling a little bit more. That said, it's still not the right configuration of that, in my opinion, to actually work in either direction.
Yeah, speaking again to that, giving Brooks 4 years, there's multiple issues with it. One being that, like, it doesn't incentivize him to improve his game because he's got, you know, multiple seasons of guaranteed money. But then more importantly, you know, if you signed him, say, to a 2-year, $40 million contract, right, in 2 seasons, that doesn't, the Rockets would still have early bird rights on him. They could then give him 2 additional seasons beyond that at that point. But if it doesn't work, they can go in a different direction. But now they're just stuck. And I'm guessing, you know, there was he was quoted as saying that, like, he was going to, you know, with Van Fleet, he's going to improve his offensive efficiency. It's like, well, John Morant is pretty good at getting you open looks, and I'm pretty sure most of his 3-point attempts were wide open. So I'm not sure what Fred Van Fleet is going to do to make him better as an offensive player and improve that true shooting.
He's going to bet on himself.
Yeah, so that's the biggest issue there. But yeah, I would also say that, like, speaking to Amen Thompson, I think he is a point guard, Josh. Like, his passing is real. And
I didn't mean that. I meant, like, they did not have a point guard for the last couple of years. and so, like, I understand them wanting some sort of somebody who can actually, like, let's slow things down. Let's push things further. Let's, like, keep things contained, calm, structured. Let's actually do things correctly. And I'm not saying that Amen can't be that, but I guarantee you the Fred thing was already well considered before they even knew Amen was going to be there at 4.
Fair enough. I think both teams, talking about the Rockets and the Raptors, I think this is the same kind of thing about not having a direction, right? Like, the Rockets think they have a direction, maybe, but maybe they don't. I mean, maybe they think these young guys can grow up quickly under the tutelage of Van Vliet and, Brooks, which is interesting, Josh.
This might be the free agency version of the same mistake that Minnesota and Atlanta have made, where they feel they're further ahead than they actually are. And then so they kind of push more chips into the pile when they're not at that stage. And yeah, I think this is the free agency version of that. They didn't trade a bunch of picks to bring in somebody, but they traded a bunch of money and a bunch of years to bring in guys that, again, you could probably accomplish the same effect to a certain degree, maybe not up to the same degree, but to like 75% of that same degree for much more long-term flexibility and much more salary flexibility.
No, I like that.
Yeah, I think the Van Fleet thing could turn out to be a decent signing because, again, it's just 2 years guaranteed that it's a team option. So that was good to get him on just a 2-year deal, even though it is inflated money. And he does have the ability to play off the ball. I would like to. That would be the ideal scenario where he takes some minutes from Amen and Jalen Green, but they still get 25 to 30 minutes a night, and they both still get plenty of on-ball opportunities. So there is a scenario where I think the Van Fleet signing is completely fine and actually good, but there are some downside scenarios where he plays like he did in Toronto, where he is on the ball a lot and he's eating up a ton of minutes and opportunities for their young guys.
Yeah, I tend to lean more toward that being the unfortunate possibility, but at the same time, if you're going to be behind anyone, VanVleet's not a bad guy to be behind. In terms of learning, the finer points of point guard play and how not to shoot efficiently. No, I'm kidding. But aside from that, no, I think that that is a concern in my mind. But also, more reps for VanVleet at point guard mean less reps for Kevin Porter Jr. at point, which I'm okay with. I've seen 2 years of that. And I think it's fine for that to happen. So I'm good with that. We could have easily gone on another 2.5 shows. I mean, there's a lot here, but let's do some rapid fire quick thoughts. Real quick, I'm just going to throw out some teams and want to get your quick reaction to them. The Hornets.
Boo.
Same, yeah.
There we go. Okay. The Pelicans. Okay.
Yep. Josh and I are on the same page so far. Yes.
All right. Timberwolves.
I actually like picking up Leonard Miller early in the second round. I thought that was a good thing for them. They have other issues, but it had nothing to do with their draft.
Yeah, thumbs up for them. I liked what the Naz Reid re-signing, as well as
Love Naz.
I'm blanking on it. The cousin of Shea.
Nickeil Alexander.
There we go. I like the contract they signed for Nickeil as well. I thought Minnesota did a pretty good job. Got some good value on both of those contracts.
Agreed for sure. What about the Clippers? The steal of the offseason, Russell Westbrook at $4 million a year. That's pretty good value. You can't say
that's not the steal of the offseason, Corban, but it is solid value. The shoe has yet to drop with the Clippers. Harden has specifically said that's the only team he's doing the same thing Dame is doing. So it's hard to give the Clippers anything more than an incomplete at the moment, because it could be completely different once that shoe drops.
Corban, your Lakers got the steal of the offseason with the Austin Reeves contract.
Oh, yes. And I brought that up before. I don't know why I reneged on that. Well, Russell Westbrook, you have to. Yeah, I know where my loyalties lie. But no, yes, I definitely agree. The Austin Reeves contract, for what it was, it was great. I'm definitely fond of that. And look forward to how he continues to develop, because the dude came in really solid and he became incompetent, has only become more solid. Apparently, I think the Athletic had a report that more offensive responsibility is going to be put to him. And I definitely want to see how that looks playing off of LeBron and AD. Last team I want to run by, the Golden State Warriors.
I actually liked. I thought Podziemski and Trace Jackson. I thought those were two really good picks for them, and I like them picking up Dario Saric. I think Saric is a great fit for them.
All right.
Yeah, and Chris Paul. I still think Chris Paul is really good when he's actually healthy. So. There are some question marks as to, him playing in the Warriors system. Chris Paul is a ball dominant, pick and roll dominant player, but he's also one of the most intelligent basketball players that's ever lived. So I think he'll figure it out. And worst case scenario, Steve Kerr can kind of run it where we run our Warriors stuff when Steph is on the floor. And then when Steph sits, we can just let Chris Paul do his thing.
There we go. Either way, I agree. I think they will find a way to make that happen. And that will do it here for the Unholy Three. Just around an hour, the shortest show we've done in a minute. It's been great. For Josh, for Garrett, for myself, we'll be back real soon. But until next time, we're Frosty. Y'all stay frosty.